think I've got it right. It's looking a little bit different today, but we'll see how it goes. My name is Kathleen, and I'm the owner and dyer behind Good Little Yarn Co. And today I'm going to show you a little bit, taking behind the scenes on how I actually do my dyeing. The colorway that we're going to be dyeing today is called Meadow. It's, as you can see from over here on the screen, it's kind of greenish, yellowish, tiny little bit of brown in it maybe. But it's very pretty. And I'm going to show you how I do each of the steps. This is a 3-layered dyeing process. And as you can see from the pan up here, I believe it's the top left of the screen. I don't know. I get confused because everything's mirrored. That one is blank. It has nothing on it yet. The one right below it has 1 layer. The one that is next to that has 2 layers, and this one up here in the top corner has all 3 of the layers. So we are going to be dyeing today. I'm going to show you the finished product. I have one of them that I can show you so you can see how it turns out, because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes with the way things are wet and I'm dyeing. And I also have a pair of socks, which I made out of this yarn. So we can kind of see it from beginning to end. That's kind of the plan. I think the way I have the cameras today, I think you can see a little bit better what it is that I'm doing. You can see all of the pans, but you can also see where I have my dyes and how I'm measuring them out. I do weigh all of my dyes because I want them to be consistent throughout each colorway. So every time I make it, it's, there's going to be variances, of course, because it's hand dyed, but it's going to be, you can pretty much count on the fact that you're going to be able to see what it is. This first color that I'm doing is a very, very light green, which I'm applying first as the first layer, just to kind of put a little color down and kind of set the basis for the other colors that I'm going to be adding. You'll be able to see little bits of this, of course, but it's mainly how all of the different layers kind of interact together. So you don't just see, color A, color B, and color C. You kind of see A, B, and C, and then also how A and B work and how A and C work together, because they kind of all combine a little bit. So this is a very, very light green. This is one of my favorite greens. I use this a lot. But like I said, it's very light and it very pastel. It's beautiful. But it's also very nice. It's kind of a first layer. Okay. So I'm dyeing today 2 skeins of each of the 4 bases that I use. I have my everyday sock, DK everyday, sparkly sock, and sparkly DK. And all of my bases are 75% superwash merino, and these 2 are 25% nylon, and these 2 are 20% nylon, and then also 5% of the silver stellina, which is what gives it this really fun sparkly look. Okay. All right. The next color that I'm going to add is this second layer right here. You can see I've already kind of rearranged the yarn, but you see this kind of lighter green throughout, and that's what we just applied to the first pan. I hope y'all are having a nice day. It's a little bit cool in North Carolina, but it is sunny and beautiful, so I can't complain. I know the Northeast had snow this week, which is kind of crazy. So luckily we have not had any of that. All right, let's shake this up. This is a very dark green. So just going to kind of add some really cool depth to this colorway. And also one of the things that it does is it kind of separates a little bit. So you get kind of these little areas of brown, which I think are really cool for this colorway. This is part of my my spring bulbs collection, and so I was kind of going for the the meadow before all the flowers bloom with the different shades of the green and little bits of brown. So that was the inspiration for this one. All right, here's that dark green. The first was kind of a yellowy green, and the second one is a little bit more of a bluey green. Here, I don't know if you can see here, but there's little bits of brown, kind of browny yellow that comes out of this one. I think makes it kind of interesting. Starting to dye. I can go a little bit more into depth in my process if you'd like. I don't want to be too basic and talk down to you, but on the other hand, I don't want to assume that you know everything, because I know when I started, I knew absolutely nothing. So, okay, like I said, this third layer is a very light yellow, which I have I've combined it with a little bit of a very light gray, just so it kind of tones it down just a little bit. Because yellow can be a pretty, pretty in-your-face color. Okay, so this is actually how much dye I'm going to be using. I hope you can see this. It's very, very little dye. But I'm going to dilute it with water just so that I can cover it over everything a little bit better. All right, here. You'll notice that some dyers, what they do is take their skeins and kind of lay them flat like this and kind of, pour over the top. A lot of people actually use large double pans, which is the way they choose to do it. It's the way they get the look that they're going for. But what I like to do is kind of, every time I pull this out to put on a new layer, I kind of readjust this so that different parts are going to be sitting on top. And instead of laying it down, kind of flat, I kind of more or less, kind of plop it down and then kind of pull some of the lighter colors up to the top. I like my my yarn when it's done to be able to be kind of like spread out, if that makes any sense. It'll make more sense when I show you the sock that I have dyed. I'm trying to avoid, when you use my yarn in a project, to have like big patches of dark green and very little yellow and very little light green, and then like a huge patch of light green and very little dark green. I think some people call it pooling, which I guess makes sense. And there's certainly a place for that, but it's just not what I'm doing. Alrighty, so I'm gonna add this layer of yellow on top. All right, and once the heat and the acid gets to that, it's going to get a little bit more yellow. Okay, so 3 of the main things that you're going to need to dye are not even just supply-wise, but just so that the chemistry of it works, is you need some type of a protein-based fiber. Oftentimes using Superwash Merino is one of the easiest ones to start with because it really takes dye really well, and you can kind of develop your colors that way doing that. You also need acid dyes. There are several different brands and different places that you can get them. I generally use Jacquard acid dyes, and I also use Dharma acid dyes. Those are the two that I use. So you need the fiber, you need the dye, and you also need a source of acid because you use mainly water, but your water needs to be acidic in order for the chemical reaction to kind of all work and have the color really absorb into the fibers, so that when you rinse it, all of the color stays there. And you need heat. So the combination of the dyes, the acid, the heat will allow the kind of magic to happen. Yeah, hello, it's me again. The four bases that I'm choosing to use, two of them have stellina in it. And one thing that I found, and you'll hear from other people, are kind of I don't want to say controversy because that sounds really dramatic, but as to whether you use citric acid as your acid source or if you use white vinegar as your acid source. Both of those will get your water to the proper acidity. I find personally, for the majority of the time I use citric acid, I find that it's a little bit more consistent. Sometimes with the vinegar from bottle to bottle, there's a difference in the acidity. So you just have to adjust, which is fine, that works too. But the one exception that I have to that is when I'm using stellina in my yarn, I'm using the sparkly yarn. If you use citric acid, it kind of dulls the stellina, so it kind of takes away from the whole point of the stellina, which is to have the sparkliness in the yarn. So I do use vinegar only when I'm using the sparkly stellina yarn. Otherwise, I use citric acid for all of that. I put I start this out. I guess I could do it just from the beginning. Maybe next week we'll do that. We start with a pan, and I put about maybe an inch and a half or so of water, and then I add a tablespoon of citric acid, or in the stellina yarn, I use about half a cup of vinegar. And I do have a pH tester, which you can use. I've just been doing it enough that I know that tablespoon of citric acid brings the water to a good acidity, as does the half a cup of the vinegar. And then I put the yarn in. I let it soak for sometimes half an hour, sometimes not quite that long, and then I start to heat it up. When I'm doing the variegated yarns like I'm doing, I like the yarn really to be ready to go before I put that first layer on it, because I want there to be that variation, those little bits of color. And if the water's nice and hot, if the fiber is nice and hot and ready to take that color, then it tends to be a little bit more sporadic with where the color goes, as opposed to when you're doing like a semi-solid kind of a color. I don't have the water as hot when I start, because I want the dye to kind of move around and get within, kind of all around the yarn before it starts to settle and attach to that yarn permanently. But like I said, I have a Facebook group. It's not, I just started it not too long ago, so there's not a whole ton of us in there, but the people that are there are very nice, very cool people. So you can come hang out there or on Instagram. And I'm Good Noodle Yarn Co. in all the places. Instagram, there are definitely more people there. I've been on Instagram longer, but whatever one you use, it really doesn't matter. But if you have any questions, you can message me. And I'll try and do what I can. Okay. This is that dark green color again. Now I mix up, most of the time, I mix up most of my dyes ahead of time so that they're in a liquid form. I don't want to say I never apply directly with the powdered dyes because sometimes I do. Sometimes as a final layer, I'll go ahead and put a little bit of speckle on the end. But in general, that's not the way I do it. I find that the actual yarn itself, after it's either knitted up or crocheted up or whatever it is that you're doing with the project, I find if you are using the liquid, it makes everything disperse a little bit more evenly. All right, let me go ahead and put this one again. I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to adjust where I have this zip tie, maybe like a quarter of the way down or something like that, and kind of plop everything back up in here. And I kind of pull see after this top part is all of the light green is kind of on this top one, the top part, and then it kind of seeps down underneath. So even on the underneath, you're going to see little bits of the green here and there. So I'm just kind of adjusting that and putting that, that kind of the green that we already have, kind of putting that towards the bottom so that there's some open bare yarn at the top that's ready to accept this new color, which is a very, very dark green. But one of the cool things about this green is that after it kind of hits the heat and hits the acid, sometimes it kind of breaks out into, it kind of adds a little bit of brown. You can see over here, this brown right here and right here, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, depending on what you're going for this particular colorway, it adds quite a bit to me. Kind of like a twofer. You get a couple different colors out of one. All right. And like I said, I'm going to let that sit about 15 minutes, and then I'll come back in and do that final layer of that kind of it's kind of a buttery yellow, I would say. This one is going to need that yellow, and this one is also going to need that yellow. All right. Now I'm going to show you the yarn that we just made. This is called Lord, I should see it. It's called Meadow, and let's see if I can get this lighting a little bit better. You can see that kind of that dark brown or the brownish colors that are in here, and then you can see little bits of the darker green, and then kind of the little bits of the yellow, and then kind of all of them together. They kind of mix together. They sit on there separately, and then they mix together. So I don't know. I love it. It's not really sure. All right. I'm going to show you a sock that I've knitted with this, and I might be able to explain a little bit better with this left and right thing. This is challenging for me. Okay. All right. See how you can see the bits of darker green, but you can see the bits of darker green kind of throughout the whole thing. And you can see little bits of yellow kind of throughout the whole thing, and little bits of that kind of light green and the kind of sagey green. You can kind of see them all throughout, so that both of your socks are going to look pretty similar. See you next week. Bye.